you ever wanted to use a Bootstrap carousel on your website but didn't want Bootstrap to mess with your website styling? Well, if so, then worry no more, because in this tutorial you will learn how to create a replica Bootstrap carousel without the use of any frameworks. So no Bootstrap, no React, and not even jQuery. Just the vanilla front-end tools of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, which includes these arrows here, which were created just with plain CSS. So I didn't use any icon library like Font Awesome. So here is what the carousel looks like. If you noticed, it's actually based off of the Bootstrap carousel, which is currently featured on the W3 Schools website. But even though they look exactly the same, I can assure you that they're both not. Now, Bootstrap does actually have different versions, and each version of Bootstrap has minor differences between the carousel that it uses, but that doesn't matter, because the point of this tutorial is to give you the basic skills that you need to be able to create any kind of image carousel. So the GUI you'll be able to create for yourself, it's up to you. And just in case you doubted that this carousel was made without the use of any CSS frameworks, I will show you the source code for it here. Here is the styling. And here is all of the JavaScript that you will be shortly creating. As you can see, there's quite a lot of it. And then here's the markup, of course. So the basic functionality is that they click on these buttons and they can go back and forth one at a time. And you can see the different images slide into position along with their text, which, as you can see, this is real HTML text. It's not pixels embedded into the image or anything. And of course you can click back to go back to the previous image. But if you keep on clicking in the same direction, and when you've gotten to the point of all the images in that direction have been shown, such as in this case, as you can see, this is the last image in the right direction. There's no more images to the right of this image. You can click in that direction one more time, and as you can see, you'll be taken back to the very first image on the opposite side of the direction that you just specified to go in. This is all animated seamlessly, and we can go back in the previous direction and it works just the same. Now, you may have noticed these circles at the bottom, and they animate as well in relation to which image we're currently on. The cool thing about these circles is that we can click on one of them to navigate to a specific image. There's one of these circles for each of the images currently in the carousel, and you can click on one of these circles at any time. You don't have to be next to the image. So as you can see, we can just click on this one and we go straight to that image there, and the animation is of course very smooth. You can click on this one, and then you can go back to using the arrows, despite the fact that we just skipped over several images in the process. Now, the best thing about this carousel is its flexibility. So it can hold as many images as you want it to have, so long as there's more than one image. Obviously this is within reason, so you wouldn't have excess amounts of images in this carousel, because that would simply be bad web design. And there's also the fact that it's responsive, so it scales proportionately. As you can see, it remains in this sort of rectangular ratio even when we move it up or down, and of course it animates as well just fine. And the final thing is, if we hover off the carousel, it actually has this auto scroll ability. So as you can see, we specified every 7 seconds, but you can specify a different time. So for every 7 seconds in this instance that we don't interact with the carousel, it will just move to the right automatically by itself. And then eventually it will go back to the beginning. As you can see, we wait now and it's back to the beginning. And finally, it's worth mentioning that the code for this project will be available online for free on CodePen. So as you can see all the code here. You can copy it, you can do what you want to it, and link will be posted in the description if you're interested. But I think I've spoken enough now. I think you get the idea of this carousel. Let's find out how to make it. So we start the tutorial in our project folder. The only thing that I've set up beforehand is the images that I'll be using. Here's the 3 images. They've all been downloaded from the W3 Schools website directly. And one thing that is important to note about these images is the fact that they all have uniform sizes of 1200 by 700 pixels. Now, the dimensions themselves can be whatever size you want, because the carousel can be whatever size that we make it, and of course the images will fit inside of the carousel, but the only requirement for the image dimensions is that they're the same. or at the very least, share similar dimensions. This is simply because any discrepancies will have to be stretched to fit inside the carousel along with the other images, and if an image is stretched then obviously it looks bad, so it's important that you consider the sizing before you begin to create the carousel. But once you've got the images that you're going to be using, you can go back and obviously just launch up whatever code editor you're going to use inside that project folder. I'll be using VS Code throughout this tutorial. Now obviously we're going to create the index.html file. This will essentially just be a dummy website. It's not going to be a real website. The only purpose of this file is basically just to show off the carousel. But either way, we will create the boilerplate code with an exclamation mark in VS Code. We'll change the title. We'll just say Bootstrap Carousel Home Made version. Doesn't really matter. And below that, but still inside the head, we'll create the link to the style sheet, which is very important obviously. We'll have a rel, and we need to say that it's a style sheet, and we'll say the href. We'll call the style sheet styles.css, and we'll need to create a new line in the head, and we'll set a comment. So the comment will say Google Fonts, so we know that all the content below this will be regarding the Google Fonts which we're about to import. So I'll type in Google Fonts Open Sans, because that's the font that I'll be using throughout this tutorial. Link will be posted in the description. I will copy the regular version and I'll copy the link like that, and I'll paste it in the head below the comment that I just created. Now below this, inside the body, we'll open it up and we'll create a div. It will have a class. We'll call it document center, like so. Now the purpose of this div is simply to center the Bootstrap carousel both horizontally and vertically using Flexbox. This is probably not something that you would need to do in a real website, since centering something horizontally and vertically would detract from the other content on the page. So obviously if you were going to do this in a real website, you would simply omit this div. Inside we'll create a comment so we can make things clear. We'll say this carousel container only exists so we can do the aspect ratio trick in CSS. This relates to the scale in proportion thing that we're going to do later on in CSS. This will become more clear in a second, and we'll create another div as well inside the document container. It will have a class of carousel hyphen container, and inside this will be the actual carousel div itself, and it will have the class of simply carousel, and its ID will be carousel-1. Now the carousel container isn't actually the carousel, hence the comment. The reason for its existence is that we want the carousel to scale in proportion, and the only way to do this is to set the width of the actual carousel element to be 100%, so we can add some padding to the top which will be in proportion to the width of the carousel. Therefore, if we want the carousel to not take up 100% the width of the document, then we will need to wrap the entire carousel in a container which has a specified width to prevent this scenario from occurring, where the carousel takes up 100% the width of the document. And the reason for this ID is basically so we can target the specific carousel, and the carousel uses template styling that all the carousels use at the same time. This is useful if you want more than one carousel on your page. However, this is an unlikely scenario since it won't really look very good, but just in case, it is possible, and you will need to create a new JavaScript file to do that, just to target the other carousel ID, but the feature is there if you want it. Now it's time to create the CSS file, so we will create it as we called it in the link tag, styles.css. The first thing that we will do is simply what you should be doing in all CSS projects, or at least it's good practice anyway, and that's removing the browser's default margin and padding just for consistency. And we'll also set all elements to use box sizing border box, so that their margin and padding will be included in the final width value. From that, we'll go back to the Google Open Sans website, and we'll copy this font family property like so, and we'll paste it in here. Underneath where we selected all elements, we'll change the background color of the body. So we'll say background color, and we'll just set it to be a nice shade of grey. So we'll use hex values to do that. So F2, repeat that 3 times in total. Then we will start the document center div. we'll set the position to be absolute. Its width will be 100% of the body, and its height will be 100% of the body. This is the reason why we set the position to be absolute, so you can do this. Its display will be flex. This will allow us to center the carousel both horizontally and vertically in the center of the body, and this element matches the body's width. We'll say justify content, that'll be center, and then align items will also be center. Below the document center selector, we will write a comment actually, and you'll say we do this because the carousel needs to be 100% width in order for the aspect ratio trick to work. And then we will target the carousel container class. We'll say max width be 980 pixels, so it can't get any larger than max width 980 pixels. On screen size is smaller than 980 pixels. Its width will be 95%, so still some gaps between the horizontal edges of the document and the carousel, but it takes up most of the width, which is good for smaller screens, so they'll be able to see it on mobile devices. And below this we'll write a comment so we know we're actually starting the carousel now and not just a carousel container, which is just simply there to configure the width. And we'll say this is the actual carousel. Overflow hidden acts as a mask. This refers to the property that we're going to create in a second. And then we'll style the carousel class like so. Its position will be relative, so we can use absolute positioning on its children. Its width, as I said before, will be 100%, but it won't be 100% of the body because it's inside a container. It will just be 100% of the container. And then we will write a comment just to make things extra clear, and we'll say width of image is 1200 pixels, height is 700. Because remember, as I said before, all the images share this dimension. And we'll say padding top, and we'll use the calc method to calculate and return a value. 700 divided by 1200 times by 100%. And the reason being for this is because we want the carousel container to resize itself in proportion in CSS, and to do this we use the padding top CSS attribute. This is because at the moment the container doesn't have any height to it. Therefore, if we left it without the padding, then it wouldn't be visible because the container would simply collapse in on itself height wise. Therefore, to give it some height, we don't actually use the height property. Instead, we use the padding top property. This is because it's based off of the width value, providing that padding top is a percentage value. And if we currently set the padding top to be 100%, then you would have a totally square 1-to-1 ratio between the width and the height. If we wanted a classic 16:9 ratio, then we would use 56.25% as the value of padding top. 56.25% because 9 divided by 16 times 100 is 56.25. And the reason for the reverse of values in terms of the ratio 16:9, the reason for this is because padding top is the vertical axis, and we want to set the vertical axis based off of the value of the horizontal axis to keep the container in proportion to the element's width value. So the reason why we use the values that we do is because all of our images are 1200 by 700, and so this is the value that we need in order to keep the container in proportion to itself when it's resized. And we'll also set overflow hidden. This is how we can allow images to animate into the carousel. And at the moment we'll say background, we'll set background color to red. This will give you a visual demonstration of what I was talking about when I was talking about scaling in proportion, just in case you didn't understand my explanation. So what we will do, we'll open a live server on this index.html so we can see what I've created. As you can see, we can see our container here, and when we resize our window, as you can see, it scales in proportion. So the height of the container changes in relation to the width of the container, but it still maintains its core aspect ratio. So that's what I was referring to. It's just a bit hard to explain. And by the way, if you don't have live server, then that's a VS Code extension, just in case you're wondering. So we'll now go back to our HTML file and we'll begin to add some of the content inside of the carousel. So we'll open up the carousel like so. The first thing that we'll do is we will add an image to the carousel, which is obviously what the carousel will be showing. And we'll say its source, go into the images folder. The first image that I'll be using is the Chicago image, and I'll write out the appropriate alt text in relation to the image content. So I'll say Chicago band. So now I'll style this image. Because I've added in this image, there's no point having this background color because you get the idea of scaling in proportion. So I'll target the image inside the carousel container like so. I'll say carousel container space to target the image inside the carousel container. Its position will be absolute, which is the reason why we set the carousel's position to be relative. And we'll match up the top left corners. So we can set the image's width to be 100% and height to be 100%. So now the image will move along with the carousel, and also it will match its scale. So as you can see, here it is. And again, we can scale it in proportion, so that image will scale nicely with the carousel. So now we'll go back to our styling. Then we'll go to our marker. And below the image, we will write out a comment. And we will say carousel content below this will not be animated. So everything below this comment inside the carousel will not be animated, which means they will remain on the carousel no matter what the image content is. And the first thing that we will do is we'll create a section. This will contain all of the circles, which, as you can see, well, which you saw before, the circles helped us navigate through a specific image, and they were at the bottom of the carousel. And we'll give the section a class of circle container, again keeping to that kebab case naming scheme. Inside we will create a div, we'll give it a class of circle, and because this project will have 3 images inside the carousel, which is a nice number, we will put 3 circles to represent the number of images inside of this section. Below this section we'll write out a new div, but still inside the carousel, remember. We'll give it a class of left arrow, and then inside we will create a span element, and that will have a class of, I actually have 2 classes in total. The first class will be chevron, second class will be left. So we specify the different classes, we separate them out through a space, and then the second div, which is below the left arrow div, it'll be right arrow. And remember, this is still inside the container, and its span element contained inside. I have a class, it will have chevron, but instead of left it will be right, like so. Now I need to style this markup, and I should explain that all of these elements, so this section, this div, they will all be position absolute, because in order for them to appear inside the carousel, which uses padding top to determine its height, obviously we don't want them to be pushed down by the padding top, so we need them to be absolute positioned. And because they're absolute positioned, these arrows here will appear above the circle container. This is because the elements that are rendered last will appear above the elements that are rendered before. This is just the nature of DOM rendering using absolute positioning. So now once we cleared this up, we can go on to style the elements. So below the image, we will style the left arrow. As I said before, its position will be absolute, and its display will be flex. This allows us to center the chevron both horizontally and vertically in this left arrow, which will essentially act as a column, which is 100% the height of the carousel. And as I said before, we will center it on both axes and align items to center it, in this instance vertically. And again, we'll say top 0, left 0, because this is a left column, so we want it to match with the left of the carousel. Its height, as I said before, match the height of the carousel. Its width won't, no, it will simply be 147 pixels. I found that was a nice value. And its cursor, we want a good visual indicator that the user can interact with it, so I'll set it to pointer. Now we won't be able to see this left arrow at the moment, so when the user hovers over it, we'll want to give it a background color. We'll give it sort of a faint gradient background color, and we will give it the pseudo class of hover, so the styling will be applied when the user hovers over it. And its background, we'll use the linear gradient method. The direction will be to left. The first color will simply be RGBA, and that will be 4 zeros. So essentially no colour, because it's black with 0 opacity, so they won't see anything. The second colour will be black with 0.3 opacity, so a very faint black there. So if we go back to our live server, as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but it's very faint. When we hover over it, this faint gradient is being applied. So we'll continue with the right arrow. So we will say right arrow, and we will set its position. Will be absolute. Display flex like so. A lot of this will be shared code. Justify content, you want that to be center. Same with align. Items, we'll also set that to center. And its top will be 0, but its right will be 0 because this is the right column, not the left column. Its height will be shared, so still 100%. Its width will be 147 pixels still, just the only difference that this is on the right of the carousel and not on the left. And its cursor will again be pointer, you want that to be uniform. And we'll actually just copy this, just because we want to save time. And we'll change it obviously to right arrow. And the only thing that will change is the direction. Instead of 2 left, we'll say 2 right. So it mirrors each other, so as you can see it's there. But what we'll need to do now, we'll need to actually style the chevrons themselves. So we will create a reference, a selector to that class, like so. We'll set the width. This will create a square of 25 pixels wide. And also a height, which is what makes it a square, obviously. Its border, we'll say solid, and it will be a grey colour. You want it to be, well, sorry, a white colour, but we will lower its opacity, which is why we used the RGBA method, and that'll be 0.5 opacity. So it'll be a white colour at half visibility, essentially. And we'll give it a border width property. And we'll say 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 0, 0. So this square actually only has borders on its top side and its right side, but not on its bottom and left. So this creates this chevron effect here, but obviously they're not rotated properly. So we'll need to style the specific right and left chevrons and rotate them in the necessary way. So we'll say chevron and right. This is a combine selector. It targets the element that shares both of these classes. We'll say transform. We'll use the rotate method and we'll rotate it by 45 degrees. So it'll be facing towards the right, and we'll do the same for the left chevron. Its transform will also be rotated, but it'll be a different value of minus 135 degrees. These are the correct values. If we go back to our document, as you can see, they're facing in the correct direction. And the final thing that we'll need to do, we will style the chevron color when the user hovers over the relevant column. So we'll say left arrow hover space, style the chevron, that's inside the left arrow. And we'll do a comma, and we'll do the same thing just for the right arrow. So we'll say right arrow hover, we'll style its chevron, and we'll change the border color, because remember that's where the graphics comes from. And we use a hex value, we'll say E6, 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 so E6 3 times. Now, as you can see, it changes colour when we hover over it, it's looking good. Moving on now, it's the circle styling. So we will write that out on a new line. Circle container, open that up. Its position will be absolute, because remember I said before that all of them will be, and then we'll say display will be flex, so we can center things easily. Justify content, center, same for line items. Also center. Bottom, it will start from the bottom, so it will match the bottom pixel of the carousel. And also do the same with the left, so we can easily set it to match the width of the carousel. And we'll set the height, hard-coded value of 45 pixels, so it's a bit off from the bottom of the carousel. And we'll style the circle inside the circle container. And so, we'll say border, 1 pixels solid white, width, we'll say 12 pixels, and height will also be 12 pixels. This will create a square at the moment. To change a square into a circle, we use border radius and we give it a value of 50%. This will change a square into a circle. And we'll say margin, we want to separate the circles out from each other. We'll give it 5 pixels horizontally. And its cursor with pointer, so the user knows that they can interact with it. And as you can see, this is what it looks like. It's looking good here. But actually I was wrong on this attribute here. Align items, it should be start, so it's aligned a bit up. As you can see, it's pushed up now because it's at the start of the vertical height of the container, which is good. So below this circle, we're going to create a class called circle fill. Now we won't actually be using this class until we get onto the JavaScript, but essentially it will have a background color of fully white. So this will let the user know that a current circle is being activated. So at the moment it should be this circle here on the left because this is the first image and the user has just loaded up the document. And it will also change based on what image the carousel is currently targeting. Now we'll go back to our markup and we'll create the text that displays on top of the image in the carousel. So this will be below the image because of the rule that I'd mentioned beforehand about how the bottommost elements are rendered on top. We'll create a section. This section will have a class. Its class will be text container. Inside we'll create 2 paragraph elements. So the relevant text for this image, the title is Chicago. There's a title and there's a paragraph. The paragraph is thank you Chicago, exclamation mark. We'll need to style these things. So we'll scroll down. The text container position will be absolute. Display will be flex. Flex direction will be column because we want the flex to act like a column and not a row. And we'll say it's justify content. That will be start. So align the items at the start of the column, but align the items in the middle of the column. So we'll say align item center. And we'll say bottom 45 pixels. So it's upwards from the circle container, which is height was 45 pixels. So it won't overlap these two elements. Its left will be 0, so it matches with the left edge of the carousel. Its width will match the width of the carousel, so 100%. Color will be white, so the text color inside will be white. And we'll give it a text shadow, because sometimes it can be hard to make out the text from the background. And it will be very faint, so 1 pixel black. And we'll set the text align to be center, just in case the text is on multiple lines. So to style the header, we will say text container space p, and then we'll use the nth child pseudo class. So we'll target the first paragraph, and we'll give it a margin 10 pixels vertical, 100 pixels horizontal. So if the header is quite large, then it won't get anywhere close to the edges of the carousel, because if it did, then it wouldn't look like good design. And we'll set the font size. It's the title, so we'll give it 1.5 EM. So it'll be quite large, and we'll copy this just because we need to save time. And then we'll change one, we'll target the second paragraph element, and all we'll do, we'll leave font size at its default. We'll set the margin 10 pixels top, 100 pixels right, 20 pixels bottom, 100 pixels left. So the same with the margin on the side, but we'll also give it the addition of 10 pixels on the top to match the 10 pixels on the paragraph header. So now when we look at it, obviously it looks good. But the problem with this is essentially when we animate these images, the text animates along with the images, and we need a way to do this. So the way that we do this, we go to our markup and we wrap everything beginning with the image. So we'll create a section and ending with the text container, so above this comment here, inside a section. It's not a div, I will say a section, like so. Well, I'll delete that because it created it for us, which is not what we wanted. And the section will have a class carousel screen, like so. And we'll need to style this carousel screen to make sure that the image matches the size of the carousel screen, which itself will be the size of the carousel, so there's no discrepancy there. So we'll say carousel, not container, screen. Position will be absolute, top 0, left 0, so we can match the width and height of the carousel. Like so everything will look fine now. As you can see, it's looking how it was before, very good. The final thing that we'll need to create in the CSS file will be the animations. After this, obviously we'll move on to the JavaScript. The main part of this tutorial, we'll create 4 animations. I know it's quite laborious, but it's necessary and they're not that much different from each other, so it's fine. The first animation is to right. We'll say start at left, end at left 100%. I'll explain all these later, we'll just copy this for now though. And then we'll change it to its sister animation to left, and all we'll do, we'll change around these properties. So it starts at left 100%, ends at left 0, and what we'll do, we'll say start at left 0 and then ends at left minus 100%. The next one will be, we'll just copy it again, we'll say come right. Now this one actually starts from 100% and it ends up at 0. And the last one, again I told you it wasn't that hard, is simply come, you guessed it, come left. And this one starts at minus 100 and ends at 0. Now the first pair of animations will be applied to the image that's currently in focus on the carousel when the user indicates that they want to move on to another image. The latter pair of animations will be applied to the image that moves in to replace the one that's moving off. So obviously a different style will be applied depending on whether it's coming in from the right or left. We'll sort that out later. The last thing that we need to do before we move on to JavaScript would be to add 2 more carousel screens. So obviously we got 3 circles in total and we need the number of carousel screens to match the number of circles. It's very important that they match because otherwise there would be a discrepancy. So I've already got the code copied from when I did it previously, but as you can see there's no worries because all the carousel screens follow the same layout, which is section, the image, obviously they share different images, and then the text container, and obviously they have different headers and paragraphs. Once we've done this, we can get on to creating the styling. So at the bottom of the body, we'll create a comment and we'll say script. Below this, we'll create the script element, and its source, we'll call it script.js. And obviously the script tags at the bottom, we want it to be the last thing that the document renders so it can reference everything above it. And obviously we need to create this. Can be in the root directory because we had no prefixes. And before we do anything, we need to create some global variables. So we'll create the comment to start with. We'll say right arrow and left arrow. Let right arrow equals document.query selector. We use document.query selector so we can target the carousel 1 ID first. And then we'll target the right arrow inside of that. Remember what I said at the start about having multiple carousels? Well yeah, that's one of the things that you need to do. You'll need to copy the script. If you're going to have multiple carousels, you'll copy the script and you will change the references to the elements to match the different carousel with the changed ID. Obviously we're not going to worry about that now because there's no point. Create the reference to the left arrow like so. And then I'll say list of all the screens in carousel, and I'll say let screen store, and this will equal document.query selector all, and that will first target the first carousel like so, and then we'll say carousel screen class. Now we've actually got multiple elements with the class of carousel screen. So what this will do, it will return a special type of data type in JavaScript called a node list. And the node list at the moment will have 3 iterations. The 3 iterations collectively will contain the 3 carousel screen elements. Obviously if you had more carousel screen elements, then it would contain more iterations to list all of them. And what we'll do, we'll declare another variable called num of screens, and that will equal screen store dot length. So at the moment that'll be 3, but obviously that might vary in relation to how many images you're using. The code that I'll be writing out in this JavaScript file, it will make the carousel work for any number of images so long as there's more than 1 image, in which case it won't even be a carousel, it will just be an image. So there's no need to worry about that. Below this, we'll write out another comment. We'll say list of all the circle stores, and we'll say let circle store equals document.query. We'll say query selector or, And again, we'll target the first carousel ID, and then from that we will target the circle container, and then we'll target the circle. So this will be a similar thing. Again, node list with the three circle elements contained in the list. Below this, we'll create one more global variable for now. We'll create a comment so we know what we're doing. We'll say number to target main screen. This will become clear later on, the purpose of this, but it will be called current screen. At the moment, we'll set it to 0. Below this, we'll write a new comment. We'll say sort positioning, don't want images to overlap. This will be a function called sort position and main screen will be the first argument, left screen will be the second argument, right screen will be the third and final argument, and inside we will use the screen store global variable, and we'll create a for each method on that to loop through the list. So we'll say screen store.for each. The iterator will be called screen, we'll open it up like so, and then we'll say if screen equals main screen, then we will say screen, or in other words main screen, we'll say screen.style.display equals block. Below that we will say screen.style.left equals 0 pixels. So what I'm doing here is essentially main screen will be the screen that's currently in the middle of the carousel. The right screen will be the image that we want to the right of this main screen, and we want it positioned to the right. Obviously position right enough so it's not invisible in the carousel, but it is ready to animate into the carousel if the user clicks on the right button, and the same for the left. So obviously if there's more than 3 images, then we want this code to work for as many images as we can have circles basically. And we don't want, say if we have 5 images, we don't want those 5 images to be displayed, all of them. We only want basically 3 images that are actually visible at a time, even though only one of them will actually be visible inside the carousel. The rest will be masked by the carousel container, which is set to overflow hidden. So we will finish this off. We'll say else if screen, we'll say if screen matches the left screen that we specified. We'll copy this. The only thing that will change, we want it to be on the left, so we will push it back by 100%. So now it will be towards the left of the carousel, so not visible. And then we'll say else if screen matches the right screen that we passed into the function. Again, copy this, or we've already copied it actually. And then we will set it to be 100%, so it's towards the right. And else, so if it's neither the main screen, left screen, or right screen, then obviously it's something else, and we don't need to worry about it for now. So all we'll say screen.style.display, and we'll set it to be none, so it just won't be visible at all. So it doesn't really matter where it's positioned, because at the moment anyway, because it just won't be visible. Now the problem with this function is there is a possibility that one of these arguments will be undefined. The reason being is because what happens if the main screen is the leftmost screen? Well, how are you gonna do it so when they click on the left and there's no more images on the left? Well, we need to animate to the far right image. So the way that we do that is we will write a comment so we remember what we're doing. We'll say if right screen is undefined, we need to repeat first screen again, and we'll say if right screen equals undefined. So in other words, document tried to find a node in the document object model, but it couldn't find anything. We'll say right screen equals screen store and 0. So in other words, in this scenario, they press the right arrow and there's no more images to the right, so we use the first left image to repeat the cycle again. And we'll do the similar thing for the left screen scenario. So we'll say if left screen is undefined, we use the last screen and then I'll say if left screen is undefined, I'll say left screen equals screen store num of screens minus 1. So basically num of screens, because this is 0 based indexing, obviously we use minus 1 because length gets the number of, it starts counting at 1, but obviously 0 based index starts counting at 0. So it just gets the last screen, which in this instance will be the screen all the way on the right. Now if you go to our Bootstrap carousel, Bootstrap S carousel, it's not actually using Bootstrap, we can see that this image is displaying. Why is this image displaying? Because of the rule that I said many times before. Because it's the last image to be rendered, therefore it's on top of the other images. Well, the behavior that we want actually is this first carousel screen to be shown. So what we're going to do is we will, below where the global variables are, we'll declare a new comment. So you know what we're doing. We'll say sort out starting position, and we'll say sort positioning, and the main screen will be screen store. Remember that node list, and current screen, which is currently 0. So the very first, so this first image basically is what we're targeting, because that's the first one that's actually in the node list. And then we will say screen store current screen minus 1 is a left screen. Now this actually will be undefined because obviously you can't have a -1 index in an array or a node list array. It has similar functioning, but we've already handled this in the if statement, so it's fine because it would just create a reference to the screen furthest on the right. And then as for the right screen, we will say screen store current screen +1. This will be defined because it will be the middle screen. So now when we go on our carousel, as you can see, it's showing this image again, which is the behavior that we want. It's good. So below this code, we are going to begin with the circle container logic. So I'll write out a comment. We'll say user clicks on one of the circles, and then we'll say we will use a for each loop on the circle store, which remember is a node array, and then iterator will be the circle, which will obviously be equal to each of the circle nodes in turn. And then what we'll do, we'll add an event listener on each of these circles. We'll say add event listener, and the event will be click. So when we click on one of the circles, and we will get the event argument so we can get access to the specific circle that we clicked on. Before we write out content in here, we'll actually go back to where we declare the global variables. We will declare a new comment, and we'll say currently in animation or not, and the global variable itself will say let in anim, and that will be equal to false currently. What this is basically the purpose of this boolean is to prevent the user from starting a new transition between screens before the current transition is complete. So currently it's set to false because obviously on document load there can be no animation, and it will be set to true when an animation is triggered, then set back to false when animation has been triggered again. So we will only be able to start a new animation when it's set to false, so we don't risk overriding an animation which has already been playing. So we will say if in anim is equal to false, so the code inside will only be able to be executed if this boolean is false. And the first thing we'll say in a comment, we'll say convert node list to array to use index of method, and then we'll say let circle store array equal array. This is a default JavaScript method, array prototype slice call, and open parentheses inside or pass in the circle store. So remember I said the circle store is a node list array. Well, the node list array doesn't have access to basic JavaScript methods like the index of method, but an array does. So what we need to do is we need to convert the node list array into a normal JavaScript array, and the way that we do that is we use this here. So now on circle store array, that will be an exact copy of the circle store essentially, and it will give us access to default JavaScript array methods like index of. So we'll say let circle index equals circle store array dot index of event dot target. Remember how I said event dot target will give us access to the specific circle that we clicked on. So what circle dot index will return the index of the specific circle that we clicked on in relation to the circle store array. So if we clicked on the first circle, it will be 0, but if we clicked on the last circle, it will be 2. Below this, we will say configure circle styling, and we'll call a method that we need to create, and it will say it will be highlight circle, and we'll pass in event.target, the specific circle that we clicked on. Now we need to create this function. This function will sort out the styling. So the circle that we clicked on will be given the fill circle style, and it will remove the fill circle style from all the other circles, because only one circle can have the circle fill class to it at a time. So below we'll create that function. We'll say function highlight circle. It will take in 2 arguments. Circle select will be the first one, the other one will be direction. Open it up like so, and inside we'll loop through the circle store like we did before. We get access to it because it's a global variable, and then like we did, the iterator will be circle as always. Whoops. And then we'll say if circle is equal to circle select, then we want it to have the circle fill class. So we'll say circle.class list.add, and then that will be circle fill like so. But else, then obviously it's something else, so we want to remove its circle fill class because it might have had that class applied to it and we want to remove it. So now obviously event.target is circle select direction. The logic for that will be created later on, don't worry for that at the moment. But now if we go to our carousel, we click on one of these, as you can see we can cycle through them like this. We can't do anything with the arrows at the moment, but this is good for the moment. It's working, as you can see. So what we need to do now is we will go back up to this sort positioning where we record it for the first time on document load, and what we need to do is we need to, on document load, this very first circle here on the left, this needs to be filled in relation to the image, which obviously this leftmost image. So we will say sort out circle styling on document load, and then I'll just say highlight circle and the very first circle inside the circle store. So we will say the 0 index like so. This is good. So now obviously on page load a class has been applied like I said before, so now that's good. And then below this we'll create a new comment. This is where we begin to add the core arrow functionality. So we'll say user clicks on right arrow, and this will be a click event listener on the right arrow, which we already created a reference to earlier on. We'll say add event listener, open that up, click, open up the callback method like so. Just keep on doing that, and we'll call a method which we need to create called start anim. Don't worry, we'll create that in just a second. We'll also pass in the argument, we'll pass in right, indicating that we want to move towards the right, and then we'll do a similar thing with the left arrow. So user clicks on left arrow dot add event listener, click, open up the callback method, start anim left like so. This is all good, and now obviously we need to create the start anim function, otherwise the code will break. So we'll say start anim, an argument, we'll call it direction, open it up, and like we did before, this code will only be, the code inside will only be called if this boolean is currently set to false. And the first thing that we will do is we'll say in anim equals true, because the code below this will actually start an animation, and then we'll say if direction equals right, then we want to trigger some moving right animations, and we'll trigger a method which I haven't created yet called move right, and we'll also highlight the circle. Now we can do this because we have created this method. So we'll say circle store current screen +1, and we will pass in right. So remember that direction argument in the highlight circle? Well, this is basically what it is. We'll add the logic, we'll complete the logic for that soon. But basically we are configuring the circle fill style to the relevant circle when the user clicks on the right arrow, because it's in this if block here. And we'll do the same for the left arrow, so the direction then will be left. We called it with left there, so we'll say if direction left. We will call a function which I haven't created yet called move left, and we'll also call the highlight circle function again. And the first argument, select circle, we'll say circle store current screen. We want it to be the previous circle, so -1, and then the second argument will be left, so we want to travel in the left direction. And because we're using the direction argument, we're going to create another else block. This will simply just be for error handling, and we'll say is anim. We want to set this to be false, and below that we will simply return else the function. The only reason why the else block exists is just in case direction, we spelt maybe one of these wrong, so direction doesn't match any of these cases, in which case you want to set is anim to false, because obviously there is no animation, and then we'll just exit out the function so no other logic could be performed. Now obviously we added this direction argument here, so we want to do something with it. So what we'll do is above this for each loop, we'll say if circle select is equal to undefined and direction is equal to right. We'll open this code up here and we'll say circle select equals circle store first one. So again, this is basically what we did with the sort positioning. So if they are going one direction so far and there's no more images in that direction, then we need to use the first image on the polar opposite direction again to basically restart the cycle. And in this case, since we're going so far right, and obviously there's no more circle elements, then what we need to do, we need to use the first circle again and target that essentially. And then else if, the same thing's happening just in the different direction, the left direction. So we'll say circle select equals undefined and direction equals left. We'll target the circle in the circle store, but it will be the end circle, not the beginning circle, which is in the case here, so we'll just copy this. And as for the iterator, we will say num of screens -1, as so. Now this is all good. What we need to do now is sort out this function here, the move right and move left, because obviously these haven't been created. But actually before we do this, we're going to create one more global function, and it will be the final global function, so don't worry. We'll call it animation time, and we'll say let anim time equals 500. So what this relates to is the animation time, which we'll currently set to 5 seconds. Because the animation will configure it to 5 seconds, we will be using this anim time value a lot throughout the code. And basically, if we ever want to change the animation time, all we need to do is just change this variable here, rather than change all of the values individually where we use it. So before we actually do these functions, we need to create some other functions first. So what we'll do, we will, above the sort positioning function but below everything else, we will create a new comment and then we'll say animation methods. These will be 4 functions. The first one will be to left, and it will take an argument screen, and we'll say screen.style.animation. We'll give it its animation property, whatever screen is. This one will move to the left, hence the function name, and again it will last for 5 seconds, as I said before. We will say ease in and out and forward to attain the last frame of the animation. And what we do is we will say set timeout function. The length of the delay of the function will be anim time. So as I said before, this variable will be used a lot. So if we ever wanted to change the set timeout, all we need to do is change that variable rather than changing each one individually. Inside, we will remove the animation style from screen. So this allows screen to repeat the same animation more than once, because once the animation is over, because it lasts for 0.5 of a second, so once the animation is complete, the animation will be removed, ready for it to be applied again another time. And what we'll do the function toRight next. Obviously, because they're all same, all these 4 functions, we'll just copy it and then we'll say toRight. We'll change this toRight, but the rest can be the same. And then comeRight will be the next one, so comeRight, and again corresponding animation, comeRight like so. Last one now, comeLeft, and then come left like so, and then we'll just close all of these because we don't need to see them ever again really. It's all fine. Now finally we can get on to doing the move right and move left functions. So above this we will say, we'll create new lines and we'll create a new comment actually first, and then we'll say move to the right, and we'll say function move right, open it up, create a new comment, we'll say move towards next screen as usual, new line, if current screen is less than number of screens minus 1. So basically what this means is if there is still another image waiting on the right and we haven't reached the end of the images on the right hand side, then we can just simply move to the right as usual. So we'll say to left, and then we'll pass in the screen store, we'll say pass in the current screen. So at the moment that will be 0, so 0 needs to move towards the left to make room for the next image, which will move in from the right towards the left, so then it will be centered. And so we will, I'll give it the comeRight animation, and then we'll say screen store current screen plus 1 like so, and then below this we'll say set timeout, and again the timeout time will be anim time. This will be used a lot, it's very important that we declare the variable, and then we say is anim equals false, because when this is called all the animations we finished, because the anim time timeout delay will increment the current screen, because we've now changed screens thanks to the animation, so now the current screen will be 1. And then to do something about this, to sort out the positioning, we'll call the sort positioning function. So this will render the necessary adjacent screens basically, and it will render them in the correct position. So the main screen will be screen store current screen, and the one on the left will be screen store current screen minus 1, and the right screen will be screen store current screen plus 1 like so. Now this if statement is good, but there is another condition if that's not the case. So if it's either equal to the number of screens or greater than, we will say or the screen coming in is the first screen again. So we want to restart the carousel cycle again essentially. What we'll do there is we'll say to left the screen store current screen, so we'll do that as normal, but the thing that's different, we'll say comeRight, that will be screen store, that will be the first image again, because remember we want to restart the cycle from the right hand side, and again we will actually just copy the set timeout. The only thing that will change is we'll set the current screen, we won't increment it, we'll set it back to 0 because this first image has come back in again and we want to represent that in our current screen number, and we can leave the sort positioning function as it is actually, which is good. As for the move left function, we'll just copy this because we are short of time. I know all my tutorials are long, that's a problem with them, but oh well. We'll change the function, we'll say move left, we will change this comment, we'll say move back to screen previously on as usual, and this condition will be met if current screen is greater than 0. So not trying to decrement current screen basically into minus numbers, because that's impossible. And this will be left as it is. This will say come left, because obviously we want the previous screen on the left to come in, and then so obviously that'll be -1. And obviously, you know, this condition will be allowed because obviously -1, well, it's greater than 0, so at the least it will be 0, it will never be minus numbers. And set timeout, this will remain the same, this will be decremented. And again, no worries of it going into minus number because it's if block here. And this will remain the same, the sort positioning. Else though, we will say, we'll change this comment. We will say move back to the last screen container. We'll change, actually we need to change this. Sorry, that needs to be moved towards the right. Both of these do, and then this will become left. That's the problem with copying code, prone to errors. And then this will be number of screens -1. I think I already explained this because of 0 based indexing basically. And this will be left as it's actually no, it won't. This needs to represent the rightmost image, whatever that is. So we'll copy that there, the current screen. So at the moment it will be set to 2 because there's 3 objects inside number screens, and -1 will be 2 obviously. Okay, before I go any further actually, there's a critical error which I need to get sorted out. So this boolean here, I actually spelled it wrong. I said is anim, but it should be in anim. So in all the places where I spelled it wrong, you might have this error as well. We'll just need to change that so it's accurate, because otherwise this will completely mess everything up. The only reason why I discovered this error now is because this is the point where we can begin to test our carousel. I respelled it wrong here, no, we spelled it right here, so it should be working now. Go back to a carousel, and yeah, as you can see it's working. So in terms of when we press right now, should go back to the first image. As you can see, everything's animated well. What we need to do now is we need to sort out these carousels. So when we click on a specific button, it will take us to the image associated with that button. So we'll go back to our JavaScript file. We will scroll down, and actually we'll go back to this loop here on the circle store. What we'll do, below this highlight circle method, we'll create a new comment. We will say work out whether we need to move right or left or nowhere. Inside we'll say if circle index greater than current screen, then we need to move towards the right, because the circle that they clicked on, the index of that is greater than the current screen that we're on. So we'll call a method which we need to create. We'll say change screen circle click, and we'll pass in the circle index, so that will be a number obviously, and it will have a second argument specifying the direction that we need to travel in. Else if, so circle index is less than the current screen, then we need to move towards the left, and we'll represent that. We'll just copy this because again it shows the time. I'm always trying to think how we can cut down on time, because I know my videos are long and that's a frustration, but I'm trying to solve that issue. Now obviously we need to create this method because it's just been called. So we'll say function change screen circle click, first argument circle index, second will be direction, that will be the string. Now we will say in anim, we'll set that to true. Make sure it's spelled accurately this time, because the animation will start in the code below. And we'll say if the direction is equal to right, so if it's right, then we will sort the positioning to get the specific images into position before the animation begins. So a bit different to how we've used this method before. We'll say screen store current screen, so that will remain how it is, but the other one, the left screen I believe, that will be screen store, and then we'll say current screen -1. And then in terms of the right screen, that will be screen store. This one will be a bit different. Circle index. We'll need to move this one towards the right because it's about to be animated in, and obviously it's the image that relates to the specific circle that you just clicked on. Below this, we'll start the animation. So to right will be the screen store current screen, and come right will be the screen store circle index, like so. Now we need to handle the left direction, so we'll say else if direction equals left. Open it up like that. We'll call this method again. We'll just, you know what, we'll just copy this, even though we need to change quite a lot. This will remain the same. This one will be circle index this time because we're moving towards the left, and this is the left screen. I already explained the reasoning behind that. And then this one will be the current screen plus 1. And again, if current screen plus 1 is uninitialized, well, we already handled that case inside the sort positioning function, so it's absolutely fine. And as for the to right, that will remain the same, and we'll change this to come left, and then this will be screen store circle index, like so, and this is fine. And like I did before, just in case direction doesn't match any of the criteria, we will stop the animation because no animation has even occurred in the first place, and then we'll just return out of the function. We'll return out of the function to stop this set timeout from occurring, which we will call below. If this caused and no animation occurred with it, then this will just mess up our code, so we want to X out the functions to ensure that this doesn't happen. And inside we will set anim to false because that didn't happen in the other if blocks. And we will set the current screen, it needs to match the circle index because that's the screen that we're currently on. And then we'll need to sort out the positioning in relation to the image that we've just animated to. So we'll call this method again, like so. And actually we'll just copy it from, it's the same one as these. So just our standards, it resets now so we can travel left and right using the arrows again. This is absolutely fine. Oh, is that working? Because this needs to be to left. Yeah, because obviously the main image will go to left and the one that's coming in will come from the right towards the left. Now, as you can see, we can travel like that. Current is not defined. Okay, that just relates to a simple typing error that we got here. So current, yeah, obviously that's not defined. It's current screen, not current. Whoops. So now one more time, hopefully this doesn't, yeah, as you can see, it's working, and then boom, we can just go like that. Even though we skipped over this middle image, we just completely skip over it, but we can still go to it though. This is the functionality that we want. And then obviously we can go back like that. The final thing that we will create is in the real carousel, if we remain off the carousel, if we remain hovered off, it will automatically move towards the right on its own automatically. Now this is an optional feature, so you could just end the tutorial here if you wanted. But if you do want this feature, then I'll show you how to create it real quick because I know how long this tutorial is. So what we'll need to do, we will actually use HTML for a bit to do this, and we will go to our carousel, the one with the ID, and we'll create a custom attribute. Now obviously in HTML, this auto scroll attribute doesn't actually do anything. We'll be using JavaScript to assign logic to it. A good time to use between the auto scroll transitions would be 7 seconds, so we'll type in 7,000 milliseconds, obviously same thing. But obviously you can use whatever time you want. This attribute there is just so you can configure it using HTML, which is, I believe, what they do in the actual Bootstrap, so we're going to copy that. Obviously you could just change it in the JavaScript if you so wanted to, but we're copying Bootstrap. That's what we're doing anyway. I'll create the comments, we know what we're doing. We'll say auto scroll feature. And what we'll do, we'll declare a reference to the carousel, because you haven't actually done that, believe it or not. So I'll say document.get element by ID, and I'll simply say carousel 1, like so. And I'll need to create a reference to that custom attribute, but because it's a string, we need to pass it to a number, so it behaves like a number. We'll say carousel.get attribute, and that auto scroll attribute, like so. And then below we'll say a comment, we'll say only implement the feature if the user has included the attribute auto scroll. So basically, if they haven't given the auto scroll attribute in the HTML file, then none of this code inside this if block will be activated, so it simply just won't have the auto scroll feature at all. It will just behave like it normally is, just static. It won't move unless we tell it to move, because obviously that is a feature if you do want that as well. But if so, if we have assigned the auto scroll attribute, then do this code. So we'll say auto scroll will be set up the very first time, and what I'll say, I'll declare a variable, and this will be set interval, and the function, well, the callback inside will be invoked every scroll times. In this instance, that'll be every 7 seconds, and we'll say start anim to the right. So that will simply, remember this function above, it'll be this function all the way up here, so it will just move towards the right. It will do all the logic for that, move towards the right by 1 image, and then below this we will say clear the timer when they hover on carousel. So when they hover on the carousel, we want this set interval to stop being invoked, basically. So when we're actually on the carousel, we don't want it to move towards the right automatically, because that will make it feel like the user doesn't have control, which is obviously not what we want them to feel. So we'll say carousel dot add event listener, and then we'll say mouse enter. We'll create the callback function, and then we will say clear interval, and then that variable that created is called auto white. So we'll clear that interval like so it will no longer be invoked. However, when we mouse off the carousel, we want it to start being invoked again. So we'll create a new comment. We'll say re-initialize the timer when they hover out of the carousel, and then we'll say carousel dot add event listener, mouse leave. We'll create the callback function like that, and then we will simply copy and paste this. So we will reinitialize auto white. Obviously we don't want the let because it's already been created. Now this is all done now. So now if we go back to our HTML file, we just wait a bit, wait 7 seconds, and it should move on its own. Just wait, a couple misses it. As you can see, it's moving on its own. And then when we hover in the carousel, we're going to wait 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi. Yeah, obviously it's clearly not going anywhere. We're going to move it out. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi. As you can see, right on cue, it moves towards the right. This is all good. And yeah, this is the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. As you can see, this is basically all we need. At the start of the video, I showed you an example of what this carousel would look like with 4 images. So you can add, again, like I said, as many images as you can fit. Circles in this row here, which contains the circles. So you can have a lot more than 3 images if you so want. But personally, I would keep it on the short side just because you don't want to overwhelm the user. And if you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. You'll do me a huge favour if you did that. And I'd also like to hear back from you. If you have any queries or comments, then I would be very happy to answer those queries and comments, and I'd also be glad to hear back from you.